Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, hosted and organized by the Department of Arab and Islamic Civilizations. My name is Noha Abu Khatwa. I'm adjunct assistant professor of Islamic art and architecture at the Department of Arab and Islamic Civilizations. And it is my great pleasure to be discussing the newly published book, A History of Graphic Design, Arab Graphic Design, with its authors, Professors Bahia Shehab and Haitham Nawar. A History of Arab Graphic Design traces the people and events that were integral to the shaping of the field of graphic design in the Arab world, examining the work of over 80 key designers from Morocco to Iraq, and covering the period from pre-1900 to the end of the 20th century. Bahia and Haitham chart the development of design in the region, beginning with Islamic art and Arabic calligraphy and their impact on Arab visual culture through the digital revolution and the arrival of the internet. They look at how cinema, economic prosperity, and political and cultural events gave birth to and shaped the founders of Arab graphic design, highlighting the work of key designers and stunningly illustrated with over 600 color images. A history of Arab graphic design is an invaluable resource tool for quite a few disciplines, one which it is hoped will place Arab visual culture and design on the map of a thriving international design discourse. It was an absolute pleasure to be reading the book. It's an extremely enjoyable read that is both thoroughly researched and beautifully produced. Fortunately, AUC Press is and the AUC bookstores are having a discount for purchasing the book as we speak. It's available at the Tahrir campus bookstore. So it's a wonderful time to be getting your copies. Our authors are both renowned artists and educators. Bahia Shehab is a multidisciplinary artist, designer, and art historian. She's professor of design and founder of the graphic design program at the American University in Cairo. Her work has been exhibited in museums, galleries, and streets around the world. She has received numerous international recognitions and awards, which include the BBC 100 Women List, a TED Senior Fellowship, and a Prince Claus Award. She's the first Arab woman to receive the UNESCO Sharjah Prize for Arab Culture. Bahia holds a PhD from Leiden University in the Netherlands and is the founding director of Type Lab at AUC. Her publications include At the Corner of a Dream, 1,000 Times No, The Visual History of Lam Alif, and of course today's co-authored book, A History of Arab Graphic Design. Her latest publication, You Can Crush the Flowers, a visual memoir of the Egyptian Revolution, was recently published and marks the 10-year anniversary of the Egyptian uprising. Haitham Nawar is a practicing artist and designer, as well as a scholar in the fields of art and design. He's associate professor of design and the chair of the Department of the Arts at the American University in Cairo. Haitham is also the founding director of Cairotronica, Cairo International Electronic and New Media Arts Festival. In terms of research, Haitham is interested in multi-scriptural design, Arabic typography, pictographic communication systems, transculturalism, and post-humanism. His most recent publications are Language of Tomorrow Towards a Multicultural Visual Communication System in a Post-Human Era, and of course, our co-authored book of today, A History of Arab Graphic Design. Please, everyone, join me in welcoming Bahia and Haitham, who will tell us more about their book, which will then be followed by a 45-minute discussion focusing on the link between Islamic calligraphic arts and modern graphic design. We would definitely love to hear from all of you, and so we're dedicating the last half hour of the webinar to your questions. Please do not forget to type in your questions in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And thank you all very much for attending with us today.
Thank you, Noha.
You're welcome.
I just want to on one personal note, I'm a graduate of the Arab and Islamic Civilization Department. I got my MA there in 2009, and it's home for me. It's a place where a lot of the big ideas were formulated there. So I'm forever grateful, and I'm honored to be speaking here for them tonight. I can see that we have almost 100 attendees now. So I want to ask them, please let us know where you're coming from. 112 people are. Please write in the chat box. We have Marwa saying that she's with us from Alexandria. So please let us know where are you joining us from. We would love to. We have Nadia from the US. We have Cairo. Alex from New Jersey. Hello. Berlin, Germany, Istanbul, Beirut, London, Chicago, Berlin, Italy, Spain. Wow. Oh my God, thank you so much. It's so lovely. Hey, Yasmin. Hey, Dubai. It's so lovely to have you all with us. This is what Athens, wonderful. We have a Jerusalem. Hello, Jerusalem. Liverpool. We have attendees from all over the world. Noha, this is really lovely.
It's absolutely wonderful. Yes, it's worth more attendees, more and more.
Yes. Okay, so we will start with thank you everyone for joining us. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you tonight. We will start. We wanted this in this talk to really break down the book for you. This is our chance to take you through the chapters, not in detail, but just a quick skim, because Noha has prepared some questions. And each of this, we decided to work on 100 years of Arab graphic design. But before going into Arab graphic design, we wanted to chart the pre-design, what was there before design, and an important idea that we will be discussing thoroughly today, which is the link between Islamic art and graphic design. That link has been made here and there by different scholars, but not really in a very clear, straightforward way, and we wanted to establish that in the book. Haysam, would you like to tell us about
No, I mean, generally, I would like to thank Noha and the Arabic department again one more time, and just jumping to, as Bahia mentioned, the structure of the book. So from first chapter about the pre-1900, and then second from 1900 to 1919, which we talk about artists and calligraphers, which is the early designer. We actually call it graphic designers before graphic design, which we mostly speak about calligraphers and printmakers, and then contributions in the field of graphic design.
Yes, we also discuss a little bit of advertising. So before we move on in the second decades to discuss film posters.
Yes, from the 20s until the late 30s, we talk about designers for the masses, which we discuss mostly design for as part of visual cultures and we talk about cinema, which includes lots of posters, and at the same time also press books and most significant designer at that time.
So mainly in this section we go through the new technological innovations, the cinema, the typewriter, the printing presses, and how these influenced visual culture in our part of the world. And in the fourth part, it's the beginning of modernity and the independence of the different states. So we discuss the process of decolonization and how design was also reflected in that process of decolonization. And then we start looking at the pioneers.
Yeah, we tried to classify and divide the 100 years of graphic design of generations. So we looked at the first generation of designers, which Abdeslam Sharif, Abdelghani Abu Al-Ainain. That's actually the one in the image is Abdeslam Sharif, and his student will be actually in the next generation, Hasan Fuad. But we also looked at also all cultural events, which is part of the looking for a new identity after the independence, which some major events in the Arab world, such as the Biennale de Alexandrie, the Alexandria Biennale, as well as festivals like Baalbek or Carthage, and some other major cultural events.
Okay, and then in 60s to the in the 1960s to the 1970s, we discuss thoroughly the Palestinian resistance and how that brought together artists from all over the Arab world to contribute, and how they were rallied behind the cause. And for it was more than 1 decade, but we discussed it thoroughly in this chapter and the reactions. And we continue in this chapter dividing designers into generations. So in here, we also discuss the second generation of designers. Before it was the pioneers, here we discuss the second generation of designers. And then we move on to, in chapter 6, a very important idea, which is the designers of the diaspora. So after the Palestinian uprising, and then all the events that started unfolding in the region, there were waves of artists that started leaving the Arab world, artists and designers that started leaving the Arab world for different reasons. And we wanted to reflect the change in the social and the political atmosphere there. So this chapter tackles a lot of that, especially here, as you can see, it's the Iraqi school of designers.
Yeah, so we go with the Iraqi designers in diaspora, and as well we will highlight the third generation of the graphic designer. And here from the 80s and early 80s until late 80s, 1990, we talk about design and the search for new identity, which the open door policies, and then discussing again the designer working for culture and with a new identity for the Arab world, also designer work for the state as part again of the open door policy. And we look for the fourth generation, which will become a little bit more wider than only the scope of Egypt and Syria and Iraq. And then you find designers from most of the Arab countries as part of the fourth generation of graphic designers.
Okay, and finally, this was very tricky for us to manage, because where do you stop and how do you stop? And we decided to stop at the year 2000. So the designers we interviewed were in their late 40s, early 50s. This age group is the last age group that we interviewed for several reasons. The most important one being that in the past 20 years, there was really a very big jump in design in the region, and that deserves a book on its own. So we thought that if we stop at the year 2000, which is, I mean, a few years after the internet was introduced. So this way, when the internet was introduced, there was a big wave of evolution, connection, development. And in this chapter, we discuss the birth of design programs, mainly the one at the American University in Beirut and others in the region that were also very influential in the development of where we are in today for Arab graphic design. And so we ended on that note with the book. So we ended on the year 2000.
Yeah, I mean, part of the return of like new generations such as the AUB, but also we have as we named the chapter, actually the birth of Arab design, which we selected the younger generation to inspire the new generation, with they're actually now very established designers, but that will be like the last classified as generation from our book.
Yeah, so yeah, this is just a very quick preview, because we will go now in detail with Noha into the ideas that will be presented in this in the book. So Noha, I will wait for you to ask us your first question. We are ready before.
A wonderful introduction. Thank you very much, and thanks again for the book. As I mentioned, it was really extremely interesting, and it brings about a lot of questions and ties to the traditional arts of Islam, of course, specifically calligraphy, which is the topic of today. And I have a lot of questions, but we're gonna limit ourselves to a few of them today. But the book does open up a lot of points of discussion, and it's extremely informative and really extremely helpful. So my first question is, was there a moment in the history of Arabic calligraphy where a need to create a new script, or even perfect a script that matches the need to invent novel script solutions for modern use, as you've explained, that process of inventing a novel script in the modern world? And also, was there a specific script from the canon of traditional Islamic scripts that you thought was more influential than others on graphic designers of the Arab world today?
So I will answer this question, Noah, and I will just start by the last part. I will give some example that we mentioned and actually in our second chapter, which is mostly for the calligraphers that they try to commercialize calligraphy and use it for graphic designers. So I give here some of the example of Yusuf Ahmad, one of the masters of the Arabic calligraphy. And Yusuf Ahmad, he was the master of Kufic script. So he started to use Kufic in book titles and magazine, which was not really common so much. So that's part of trying to start use Kufi in his book cover, دراسة في تطور الكتابات الكوفية, or Palestine, which is the must-hit for a newspaper. And then I jump from this to Riqa, which one of the most popular one actually used for the masses was Al-Qasas in the last script. And here some other examples by Said Ibrahim, again, that they call him the dean of the Arabic calligraphy. And they use for like a logotype, I would say, for Naguib al-Rayhani, some of them, the celebrities or even politicians. I mean, he did also for Gamal Abdel Nasser and Muhammad Naguib, but also they see here for Kulthum, Naguib al-Rayhani, and film titles as Yom Saeed, some logos for the department stores such as Chicorel, for example. So those are classic calligraphers. They started by make it more popular, more vernacular, I would say. And then from that, it goes that people go from styles such as Naskh, and he invented scripts that worked mostly with newspapers and magazine again, but mostly for the inside. So those are types, some fonts designed by Fathi Gouda. He's a professor in the applied arts school in Helwan University. So he did this in the 70s for El Jumhuriyya and El Misa. So that was very new and very experimental that they use actually this type, which the first one goes from Naskh, this one it goes from somehow Riqa. And then, of course, if we talk about the mostly used calligraphic styles, which mostly in film posters. And you see, of course, Riqa was the most popular style to be used. And here قطار الليل, العزيمة by Abdul Aziz, and Raghib, Ahmad Shafayef, Ben Idek, again using a bit of Riqa. And then the same style, which is a little bit, was used also in the newspaper and publishing industry, which they called here in Egypt Manchet, which is again coming from Fusha. It was in the Levant, or mostly in Lebanon and Syria by Ismat Shambour. He used that style. In Egypt, I tried to trace who actually used the style in the newspaper and magazines. It was very difficult. They mentioned names as Muhammad Hammam recently, but also Adli Bolis from Al-Ahram. But the real inventor of this style, nobody knows about it. But here we have again from Anwar, الكيف كأكون في الشارع يوم مر يوم حلو سواء الأتوبيس. Those are all coming from Naskh, then used for popular designs. And lastly here, that's by Yusuf Abdelki in Syria. And again, that's coming from the Naskh, nearly like the other ones used in Egypt.
Well, I find it very interesting that the beginning is Kufi, and Kufi is our, archetypical, the script of all scripts. And then the move towards Riqa and Naskh, and especially in Riqa, like it became more popular throughout the decades than the Kufi, which was the start to move it to that, as you were explaining, vernacular setting. And you've mentioned Muhammad Hammam. He was, I've met him a few times. I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he's a wonderful calligrapher who did amazing thuluth and muhaqqaq. Absolutely amazing. And his naskh was quite spectacular as well. He was right there in Bab al-Lu. Thank you, Aysam.
He just passed away last year, so
he did.
85 years old.
Yeah. Oh. I'll jump into my second question. Going like throughout the book, I really could not escape thinking about the great Ibn al-Bawwab, when reading about many of the great graphic designers you discuss. He was originally a house painter and decorator, a calligrapher, illuminator, a binder, and also a librarian. So I'd like to call him, if I can, a polymath of the arts, as it were. Is there an Ibn al-Bawab of the period you're covering, like of the 20th and early 21st century?
Actually, yes, we have one. There are many of them are quite spectacular, but since we are discussing the script today, I would like to highlight the work of Nasri Khattar. Nasri Khattar was an architect, a type designer, and he was really multi-talented, multi-skilled. I just want to I mean, some of the inventions that he was part of was the first IBM typewriter in the early 1950s. And part of his the exercise for this was to cut down the number of letters from more than 100 letters that were being used in, or even thousands of letters that were used in the printing, down to only 30 for the typewriter. And then he flew in the late 1948 to the court of King Farouk in Egypt, and he had these typewriters with them for them to be implemented here in Egypt or utilized. He patented the design of his alphabet, which is the Unified Arabic, and this was patented in 1947. And his idea was that he wanted to create letters that are designed individually and that read individually. So instead of connecting letters, they would be separated, and then this would make it easier to type them, to write them, and to read them. He went as far as designing books for children to help them learn how to read. And he got a grant from the Ford Foundation, and he started experimenting and doing read eligibility tests to prove that his font is easier to read for children. He went as far as creating ads and hiring the puppeteer of a very famous puppeteer in the US to create an ad about the letters, to promote his letters, Al-Abjadiyya al-Muwahhada, which is the Unified Arabic lettering system, which had these separate letters. He was attacked aggressively, and he was accused of Latinizing Arabic. He was accused of actually sabotaging the beauty of the language. And if it wasn't for the fact that someone like Khat Foundation and Yara Khoury Namour, who dug out his archive and created this beautiful book, we would have never known about him. And I want to share the story of two such personalities, Azmat Shambour, which Haysam has mentioned him before, and another Azmat Shambour from Lebanon, and Muhammad Saeed Sagar from Iraq. These two personalities, everyone we meet tell us they were so important and their contribution was really important, and we can't find their work. So it's really, we know of Nasri Khattar because we are lucky that some people decide, his daughter preserved his legacy. It was donated to the American University in Beirut. Yara Khoury wrote the book. So we are lucky that part of history was preserved. But then on the other hand, in parallel, there are so many Ibn al-Bawabs that have been forgotten and disappeared by history. So this is always important to remember. Sagar he invented these routes in an attempt to minimize the number of letters that were used in the printing press, so that he can speed up the process of printing. So what Sagar was trying to do, and what Nasri Khattar was trying to do, is adapt Arabic into a new medium so that it can really be utilized. It's not about the beauty of the letter, but the utility of the letter. And these are two very completely different things. And this is where a lot of the confusion comes from. And we will discuss this further in detail. But I highlight Nasri Khattar, and I mourn all the unknown Ibn Bawabs in our design history.
It is such a pity about the unknown people, because we dealing with primary sources, especially for the medieval period, for the Mamluk period, and you come across all of these people that are mentioned, but yet you don't have their products or some details of what they've their contributions, which is always a pity. And just like Ibn al-Bawab, he is credited for beautifying the script or canonizing what Ibn Muqla earlier was already kind of putting rules to for the purposes back then. Nasri Khattar is doing the same, but for like these practical reasons, we need to typeset, we need to make it easier. And it is a pity. And Ibn al-Bawab, you know, we only have that for sure one manuscript that survived by his hand. We wished we had more, but it is a pity. And it's a pity that even today, and this is recent history, we don't have the legacy of these people you're mentioning, and they're not recorded, they're not documented. Thank you, Bahia.
Quite sad.
Yeah, tell them, Bahia, because sadly, Sagar was jailed because of his invention.
Oh, yeah, actually, he was put under house arrest for 1 whole year because he was accused also that he's making Arabic look like Hebrew with his solutions.
Yes.
So he was accused of being a spy. So it's always these regressive ideas, and it repeats in history now. I mean, you will see it's like a recurring scenario for us.
You reminded me of Ibn Muqla for political reasons. He had his fingers chopped up. So yeah, history does repeat itself. I just want to remind everyone, please, if you have any questions, the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, put your question there and we will get to it. Once we're done with the discussion, we're going to have another discussion with all your questions as much as we can. So please don't forget to put your questions there. Moving on to another point that was brought up by the book. The Islamic manuscript tradition had a great influence on modern Arab graphic designers, as you've underscored very well. Would you say that there was a specific discipline, like fan, that appealed more widely to the graphic designers, you discuss? And within this context, I found the works of Nadim Ramzi in designing modern Quran codices, the examples that you have in the book, to be a curious mix of Safavid, Shirazi, Quran manuscripts and Mughal ones. And I also thought that the examples you have in the book of Al-Waqa newspaper harks back to Persian manuscripts, production of more or less epic poems in its design, for instance.
Yeah, okay. So I will take this question actually to draw the parallels, because Nadim Ramzi's example that you give is actually almost yeah, it's almost a visual reproduction of what we were seeing, but he actually reproduced it mechanically. And this is actually a breakthrough because it's very detailed, it's very colorful, but it's actually an imitation. So it's in the form and the structure and the motifs, it does mimic previous forms. So if you look at, I mean, three main ideas that we try to drive in the book is, throughout the history of Islamic art, there were clear, evident visual systems for different dynasties. In this case, I mean, we're looking at Safavid Iran, but if you look at the Ottomans, they have their visual language. If you look at the Mughals, they have their visual language. If you look at the Mamluks, they have their visual. If you look at Qajar, so every dynasty, or the gunpowder dynasties, you start having this really very developed and sophisticated aesthetics in the arts. And this is reflected in the architecture and the travels. We know of the design ateliers that existed and that the art ateliers, and how the same motif would be, as you see here, in a manuscript, and then it would be on a tile in a mosque, and then it would be on their robe. So this collective thinking is very important. And this system is what they call what they call now like a total branding in design. When you brand something and you have your image and your visual identity in it all together. But this busyness, this intricate repetitiveness was translated by Burhan Kartkutli in the 70s. And you have these moon-eyed beauties, moon-faced beauties, and the hair and the intricate details. And the way he draws the veil, it's not an imitation, but rather a translation, a reinterpretation of the aesthetics of that period. So it's like as if you take something, you digest it, and then you create something new. Whereas the Nadim Ramzi is an imitation, is an actual reproduction of previous design. But we see here with Burhan Kartkutli and with someone like Helmi Touni, a digestion of the design and a recreation of it, mixing vernacular culture with Islamic aesthetics, with these frames, manuscript motifs that they mix. But it's rather, I mean, it's that was important. It's the translation actually. And then you look at the Mamluk systems, yeah, and I look at the heraldic devices, and I have to think that it's really fascinating that they had these really intricate, detailed systems that were identifying every object everywhere on their items. So on a lamp, on a piece of cloth, on everywhere you looked, they had their logo. So they total branded their buildings and their clothes and their objects. And this was a communication system, and nobody thinks about it as a communication system. So you have someone like Munir Sha'rani creating visual systems and identities in the 80s. But the logic of a visual system, it has existed historically from the Mamluks. So to us, it was interesting to draw that parallel. And finally, the Topkapi scroll is one of our favorite, most prized findings, and we love it for many reasons. But to us as designers, this is the ultimate proof of the planning, of the intricate mathematics, of the study of the square kufik. And then you start seeing how the square kufik trickles into everything. And this is the logo by Sami Rafa in 1958. And for 30 years, Sami Rafa is using this square kufik in his design up to the first Cairo Biennale in 1984. In the middle of this, in 1975, he creates this well-known famous monument. You had Melehi Belkahya Shab'a in Morocco in 1966, utilizing the square kufik. And in the 1980s and 90s, you have someone like Abdelkader Arnaout in Syria also utilizing square kufik. You have Saleh Juma'i in the 1970s replaying with square kufik. Hashim Samarji, again, reinterpreting square kufik also in Iraq. And then Magdi Abdelaziz in 86, creating an unpublished cover for the Islamic Museum in Cairo, also inspired by the square kufik. So to me, it's these patterns that have continued and that have survived. And they are so clear. It's very evident. I mean, Haitham will be discussing more other details that highlight, and you will see the impact of Islamic visual culture. And what I wanted to communicate here is that it was not only the script, it was everything else.
It's a whole, it's the interplay of all the pieces that make the Islamic art. Geometry, calligraphy, arabesque will all fit together to inspire them. And I see that it wasn't necessarily a specific fan or discipline. It was everything. They borrowed modern graphic designers. As you've shown now, I think they've borrowed from Abbasid paintings on their palaces, and the like the Ghaznavid, Lashkari Bazaar painting is there, and a little bit.
I love the fact how your eye can see that. I love the fact that
it's lovely. And then but yet he adds this his own rework of a tawqiya script in the middle of all of this. So it's they're not sticking to they're looking at everything in that tradition and past, and then they're being inspired by all its pieces and bringing in the pieces in their work, which is quite fantastic.
It's the visual systems. It's a whole system itself, not just only the script. It's the whole visual system.
And I like that you were saying like this is the Safavid brand. This is, you know, the Mamluks had their rank system, their insignia, and it is, yes, they are branding their objects. Each Amir, this is mine. This belongs to me.
Yeah.
So this is quite fascinating. Once again, I just want to remind everyone, please, if you have a question, put it in the question and answer option at the bottom of your screen. We will get to them eventually. My next question had to do with the early efforts of typesetting Arabic. So one of the most successful examples that you bring up is the Bullet press. And it's quite disappointing that we don't know of any calligraphers who were involved in that process, and in the development and design of movable Arabic scripts. Can you elaborate on why this was the case? Why is it that did they seek out the help of calligraphers? We just don't know, or they didn't altogether? Especially since like a few decades later, King Fuad, he commissioned this Quran manuscript, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't typeset, but he formed a team of Egyptian calligraphers and also hired the great Turkish calligrapher Abdulaziz al-Rifai to help in producing a printed copy of the Quran in 1922. So was there like a change in thinking by the time of King Fuad, who would have actually maybe used the help of that team, in addition to Abdulaziz Rifai, to typeset his script, that wasn't there when in the 19th century with the bullet press? What do we know any details?
Yes, we will give you all the details. Actually, we have all the details. This is what we're here for. We're here for the details. But first, I want to point out a big black hole in our history called the history of Arab printing, because it's not documented. We don't know enough about it. There is one brilliant book on Fatimid block printing. So we have a really brilliant resource that has collected all of the data on that. But then really we have like a missing part of our history that's not found and needs to be written. So this is a call out to all the historians who are interested. Please, we have a gap, and it's really important for us to understand the evolution of printing in our part of the world. But I also wanted to show you some examples from Europe. This is an example from 1486. So these are examples of the earliest Arabic letters found in a European printed book. So this is a quick timeline of Arabic typesetting in Europe. I mean, I don't want to go too much into details, but up until 1796, until the invention of the lithography, there has been a lot of inventions and developments for the printing Arabic, especially for religious manuscripts. So because the Catholic faith was trying to expand into the region, so a lot of the printing was developing in Europe, and this is a quick timeline to show you that experimenting and exploring with Arabic, the technology was there, you know, so, and the technology needed a market, and for you to grow markets there are, but we had, I'm sure you'll be able to tell me maybe how many calligraphers we had in Istanbul at that time, and that would be, yeah, enough to understand why they did not adopt the printing press. So while there was this invention developing and evolving in Europe, we had calligraphers, but then they were very big on lithography, because lithography didn't kill out the calligrapher group, because it still utilized their skill and just reproduced it. So if you look at a quick timeline of printing in the Arab world, so actually the date you said is 1922. I have 1924 for the first Quran. being printed in. But you can see how long it took us before printing became mainstream for us. We are still looking at reasons and theories. I mean, in the book, we explore a few, but this time gap caused a lot of delays and problems for the evolution of Arabic type design. So it's mainly because of the delay in the introduction of the printing press. Some say it was the calligraphers who were lobbying against the introduction. Some say that they did not want to reproduce the word of God because they did not want mistakes in it, and it had to be scribed by hand. So there are many theories that we explore in the book, but the main reason is the reason why Arabic typography is where it is today is because we did not involve calligraphers in the making of the typesetting letter design from the beginning. Haitham, you have something to add?
I just want to add, it's also when they started the printing in Europe, that was not also by Arabs, and of course not implementing the efforts of calligraphers, who were mostly Armenians. The craftsmen, they actually work in the typesetting, they're mostly Armenians. And they didn't actually know the language, but because of the Armenian alphabet, whoever was commissioning them, which mostly was the church, they asked them to do the Arabic as a foreign non-Latin script. So that also affected so much the way how the Arabic, in the early printing, the way how the Arabic letters look like. So, and that's one of the examples that Bahia showed in the images, was actually it shows that also they're not beautifully or aesthetically adapted to the calligraphers, the early calligrapher styles. And again, I mean, there is debates about the beginnings of the Arabic printing in the Arab world, because there was a version in Germany, another version in Italy. But when it came in the Arab world, it started in Lebanon, and then afterwards in Egypt. But also, it was also for all religious contexts.
An important idea I want to build on what Haitham said is the fact that Arabic, the first typeset design, if we go back here, the first sets of Arabic designed were actually by non-Arab speakers. What they were doing was copying from the beautiful calligraphic styles that they were seeing on monuments and in manuscripts. And the main problem was that they were copying complex calligraphic systems onto a very limited lead printing press. So the cases that were designed for Arabic were literally in the thousands. And Arabic became to be perceived as difficult to learn and difficult to print, because the people who were actually taking Arabic and adapting it to the new machine were adapting the calligraphic style and not taking into consideration that this is for legibility and not calligraphy. So this is really the beginning of where all our problems begin. This translation, this mishap in translation caused a lot of delays and a lot of problems for printing in the Arab world.
Yeah, it is. And it's the calligraphy with its rules and geometric base and proportion, the golden ratio, and to be able to transfer this, and you're not even a trained calligrapher, is, I think, be almost impossible.
Yeah, this is why you had people in the future like Nasri Khattar, Saggar, come to try and fix that and try to communicate. Arabic is for legibility. Calligraphy, you can do whatever you want with it. It's beautiful. You can keep following the systems, but we need novel solutions for the problems that we have today.
Mm-hmm. And maybe had it been any, it's very possible that some calligraphers were asked, say in the example of the Bullet Press, to help, and they refused because that's their livelihood. And maybe had they helped then, or if they were asked and refused to help, then the price is being paid now, or they were never asked to begin with. It was a big problem. It's, you know, as you explained, it was a buildup.
Yeah, and the scholar who's working on this is Hala Auji. So I highly recommend whoever is interested in printing. And that, I mean, that gray black hole, Hala is one of the few people who has managed to fill it. And she wrote a brilliant book. So whoever is interested can read Hala Auji's book on the topic.
And there is also the book of Titus Nemes. That's also from Brill. Publishing house. It's also his PhD dissertation was also about Arabic.
Both books are published by Brill.
Yes.
Wonderful. And thank you for the timelines. They're a great teaching tool.
Thank you.
Then they made things, you know, fall in place. It made sense.
We hear you. We
Lovely.
hear you.
It was lovely. Um, Moving on, I have two more questions to go, and then we can open the floor for everyone and their questions. And please don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. As I went through the book, I thought that Kufi was instrumental in the posters for historical movies. So did designers like Raghib Ayed think of it as an archaic script that reflects that historical theme? And within that same context, other designers did try to connect the script type to the genre they're representing. From amongst the examples you bring up in the book is Abdeslam al-Sharif's book cover for Muhammad Sobhi's book on Chiang Kai-shek, which employed an Arabic script influenced by strokes used in Chinese characters. Letter forms that were very reminiscent of the Arabic used in Muslim China centuries ago. Hashim Samarji's work with square kufi, which you've already mentioned, and Abdul Qadir Arnaout's fantastic play with the angular scripts as well, and you showed a few examples earlier. And finally, Muhyiddin al-Labbaid's use of a very elegant thuluth for book covers with art historical themes.
I can take this, and I will start actually by the examples you mentioned. So it was used to have people with, when they have a historical movie, whether it's like Khalid ibn Walid, which is quite old, and even Yusuf Shaheen when he directed the Nasr Salah ad-Din, they used actually to go like mostly classical look of historic / religious. But then they go classic with Kufi. So Khalid ibn Walid, you see that they're using actually similar, I would not say even Kufic, but inspired by Kufic, and similarly Nasr Salah ad-Din. But if you go further, here Munir Kanaan, which is also arts and designer, that also for the, again, Sitt al-Husn was again historical, the content of the movie is all historical, so he started again using, inspired by the Kufi script. But afterwards, they will develop the style. They will get the feel of the content of the whatever kind of it's a movie or publication. Next slide, please, Bahia. And you mentioned Abdel-Qadir Arnaout from Syria, which is the master of the masters, and he invented a lot of scripts, and that's for the spring flowers. Actually, it's a flower fair. It's for, and this angular script is beautifully invented just only for the topic, for the subject itself. So, but also he was very much interested in classic calligraphy. So did work, as Bahia showed, some of his work with square Kufic, for example, but also he invented a lot of new script, such as this one.
Yeah, and this one actually he is recognized, it's kind of his signature. So designers in Syria would tell you, if you, the minute you see this, you would know that it's Abdel-Qadir Arnaout right away. So it became kind of, he's known for it.
Yeah, nobody used it before him. Also the one, it was the Isbu' al-Funun al-Sha'biyya al-Awwal, that's the one to the left side. Again, that's also signature of Abdel-Qadir Arnaout, inspired by, it's the folk art and have some decorative elements in the design itself, but he also tried to imitate, or actually taking some of the elements in his newly, we don't see really, it's more like lettering, because it's not a whole alphabet, it's just only the text for the design itself. And the example that Bahia showed before was the square Kufic. And here you mentioned Abdeslam al-Sharif, Abdeslam al-Sharif from Egypt, the first generation of graphic designer, and the monthly book of Muhammad Sobih, which is having a Chinese, an Arabic lettering imitating Chinese character style. And again, that was very old. And Kalila Udemna, back again to the Kalila Udemna, and again using in Kalila Udemna the lettering, same style of the floral style that is inspired by the two animals of Kalila Udemna to have the title. And again, Burhan Kalkutli and his beautiful lettering, which is using floral decorative elements in the calligraphic style he uses, which is based again in I would say inspired by Kufi, but it is a lettering. And next, Bahia. And here's some of the Hashim Samaji, again based on in Kufic, and some of the lettering he uses for book cover. It's a poem by Abdul Wahab al-Bayati, and some of the to the left is a poster about Palestine. And again, here it's also very interesting between Kufic and also having an inspiration of cuneiform. Mm-hmm. So trying to mix between ancient script and the Arabic Kufic. And of course, the master of Mituni, she spoke about him before, but I mean, you can see already from the book title, from the posters and the children's books, he's full of again, it's embedded in his style of the inspiration of not just only the, as we mentioned before, the Arabic script, but also the whole visual system of the Islamic art. No, if you want to say something, I mean, again, that's some.
Helmi Touni always fascinated me because precisely what you were saying, how he interprets, as they were saying, he digests, and then you bring out this amazing work that has its roots in the traditional arts of Islam, and it's his own interpretation that goes very well with the genre he's covering as well. So it's a malhama.
Yes, and I mean, the poster to the right is also his design. It's a beautiful poster for the Palestinian cause and between the solidarity between the Palestinian people and the Soviet Union people. To the left is Burhan, Kamal Bullata, the Palestinian also artist and art critic, and inspired by Kufi. To the left, you see the way how Abdel Ghani Abu Al-Ainain in his book cover for Muhammad Hassanain Hekel express Kharif al-Ghadab, which is the fall of anger, and try to express this in typography. And to the right side, Emil Menahem design as well. It's a book cover by Emil Menahem. I'll try to be quick because they have many examples. That's Bikar, some of his beautiful lettering, Ornate al-Hub, هذه السوداء أحببتها for Africa, and نداء المجهول illustrated book for Mahmoud Taimur, and beautifully Muhyiddin al-Labad, and using archaic script as part of his translated publication for Ibn Rushd Publishing House.
So this also, again, Noha, is where you see this clear Islamic influence being taken, reinterpreted, almost copied, but with adding all this modern white, simplifying, so creating a new visual language again that reflects what we were discussing in the beginning. So being
it's amazing, like the surah titles in Qur'ans, or the shamsas in marginal medallions in different manuscripts, and the background hatching that we find in opening pages of manuscripts.
Kufi al-Masahif al-Ula, also with the layout of Kufi al-Masahif al-Ula, which is fascinating.
Very obvious, you can see it in Muhyiddin Labad and Helmi Touni. It just like, it pops in your eyes. And the example you just mentioned by, again, Muhyiddin Labad, but his recent work, and you see it's a book about Palestinian stamps, and again, سير ورسوم شعبية. It's again folk drawings. Again, Muhyiddin Labad.
محقق and a little like محقق letters, and then at the very last one is going to be توقيع. It's wow.
Okay, next slide.
I love how Noha is so versed. I love how she's so versed with her scripts إنها بتلقط الحرف حتى يعني. It's amazing.
This is actually a children's book, translated foreign literature by Muhyiddin Labad, the design. It's for, and it's in his actually experimental workshop, which is the first experimental workshop for graphic work for Muhyiddin Labad, and this two published book. And you see the way how he traditionally worked with calligraphy. To the right side, that's his hand lettering. And this is the way how he was doing the montage to do the typesetting manually for the books.
It's the Quran of Al-Hadina. I see the old prototypes.
Exactly.
And just to end by Arus Nil, that's some of the press book, and you can see how they visualize the word Arus Nil. It's the pride of the Nile by the lotus flowers. And again, Sarira al-Hub, too young for love, visualizing the word love with the shape of heart. But this is really early example of 60s. So we talk about like 80 years old designs. And this is the way how they visualized Arabic script in form of lettering.
Foliated this script using ancient Egyptian lotus, because the lotus used in Islamic art is usually, and even in materials produced in Egypt, is the chinoiserie, it's the Chinese lotus. It's really almost never the ancient Egyptian one. So that's a twist on it. Wonderful. I don't want to be, just one more question so that we can get to questions of our audience. And that last question is like to pressure you to publish a sequel about these people. Because towards the end of the book, you speak about artists who influence graphic designers. So for example, Hasan Masoudi and his integration of lettering and the usage of his own Persian Kufi, Rashid Quraishi and his calligraphic artwork representing metaphysical concepts, Hasan Musa and zoomorphic calligraphy pieces. They really do deserve another book. And my question is, how did their work as artists, they're not considered graphic designers, using Arabic as their main medium of expression influenced graphic designers nowadays?
So I just have to differentiate a little bit before I start talking about them. Is actually some of them did graphic design, and some of they didn't do graphic design. Like I will start here by Hasan Musa, the beautiful Sudanese artist and designer in Diaspora as well. He lives in Marseille at the moment, but he did work in the design, and beautifully that's the start of his work actually commissioned by the Ministry of Culture in Culture or Education, Bahia?
This is the Ministry of Education in 1977, actually.
Yes, that was commissioned by the Ministry of Education in Sudan. So you can imagine in the 70s, that's a work, a book cover, 2 book covers actually for in Sudan, which is again very remarkable in terms of political context to see this work commissioned by the ministry and published in Khartoum. So Hasan Musa, beautifully he uses calligraphy in illustration, but not just only illustration, but also for design. And we didn't show his artworks, but also there is a beautiful artworks that actually uses using his calligraphic style with the morph he does with letters. And you can see one of his beautiful books. And that's the second phase of his work in Marseille, in France, after he left Sudan. And that's the alphabet, the alphabet of Shahrazad, which is a beautiful letters in a female figure with beautiful lettering as well.
But Noha, do you see how he takes like Mughal and zoomorphic, and then he adds the Chinese line quality,
yes,
and then creates a completely new language that is sensational.
Quite brilliant.
I mean, it's only here 2 slides for Hasan Musa, but I really recommend people to look at his books online.
Please buy his books.
Beautiful.
They're
only the ones published in France, they are available online, but some are also for his children's books as well, they are available, but all books in Sudan was not really available. And here is again, master of the masters, Najah Mahdawi, and he's an artist using Arabic letter. And I mean, some consider his work as part of the Harufiyya movement. It's an art movement using Arabic letter as an element for art or design. So Najah Mahdawi, Tunisian, based in France at the moment, he's using Arabic letters to create these beautiful compositions. Some of them by like black ink on paper, and the other one was actually painting with color. And many phases, many different phases. And by the way, the scale of the work is huge. So they're not actually small. We saw some actually of his work, Bahia. Could you go through? That's one of his work actually used in a facade of a mosque. And you can see his calligraphic style and lettering used as to transfer the light, as well implemented in the Gulf Air and the airplane. And I'm not sure if this.
This is the Facebook headquarters in San Francisco. So when we talk about impact, and then we think of the arts, and the reason why we have them at the end of the book, because designers are busy with the right now, with delivering to the market. Artists, on the other hand, are the reflective practitioners. They take more time to create a new visual language. And this eventually, this is what status seeks. Remember, we mentioned Ibn al-Bawab and all the calligraphers historically who were actually the sultans would seek the calligrapher, not the calligrapher would be seeking the sultan, because they validated power. When art validates power, historically art always validates power. So when Naja Mahdawi designed the 50-year anniversary for Gulf Air, he designed 4 beautiful planes for them. This is one of them. When Facebook in San Francisco wanted to bring in Arab identity into their headquarters, they got Naja Mahdawi to design the facade and the glass of the space. So art always historically has validated power.
And this is beautifully the work of Rashid Quraishi. He's an Algerian artist again and designer. And Rashid Quraishi, so much inspired by totems, which is known in the Arabic word for them is the
طواطم.
Yes, طواطم, which when في مصر بنسميهم completely forgot the word, but it doesn't matter. But you can see how he writes small scripts that sometimes readable. Sorry again?
أحجبة.
الأحجبة, yes, thank you. Very. He was so much inspired by الأحجبة, the totems, and then he have a lot of stuff that you can read. They say the الوجود صلى الله عليه وسلم into the right side, and some others that actually cannot really read, but you know there are mix between symbols and pictograms or Arabic letters mixed by and stuff. And his work is also printed in several mediums. So some of them are in fabric, some in ceramics, and different mediums. And he exhibited his work here only one time, actually in the Islamic Art Museum.
No, this was actually at the Haus der Kunst Museum in
No, I'm not talking about this one. I'm not talking about this one. Some of his work was exhibited here before.
In Cairo.
Yes.
Do you mean the one in Dar al-Kutub?
No, there is actually a piece for him was, I think, part of an exhibition in the Islamic Art Museum, something like that.
Okay, we will follow up on that. But I want to highlight that Rashid Quraishi is also a Sufi. So he's very much influenced by Sufi writings and Sufi readings. He looked at the Amazigh culture in North Africa, and he's inspired by, as you can see, Islamic manuscripts and scientific manuscripts in Islam. So these visual influences, especially here, when you see these squares and these, you think of the astronomical books and the astronomical manuscripts in Islam, and you can see his deep research in that and his experimentation across different mediums. So he takes them, he applies them on fabric, then he projects them on the wall, creates ceramic, creates them in metal, creates a wardrobe out of them. So he also tries to create a total visual language with his invention. And finally,
sorry, Bahia, just to mention that the project that he did work here was actually in Khayamiya. So he was commissioned people in Khayamiya that to implement his design using the Khayamiya style. I'm just trying to remember the place, but he had this beautiful work. Bahia, go ahead with Samir.
So finally, the final designer artist we want to share is Samir Sayiq, who is my mentor and a dear friend and my teacher. He is always creating new structures for the new architecture for the Arabic. And he's also between design and art, and he's navigating these two spaces and exploring new visual expressions in the architecture of the letter itself. And how do you innovate on the letter itself? So to summarize, these artists in total, their work is influential because they are the reflective practitioners who actually have time to play with form, innovate with the form, read on the form, and develop on the form. So they are the visual thinkers that inspire designers and that inspire, as you can see, that validate authority. And that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely fascinating. My favorite is Rashid Qureshi, because his as you mentioned, the words and letters are used in that idea of the hijab, or it's the talismanic power of the word and the symbol. So when he's bringing in the Amazigh symbols, mixing them with certain words for their talismanic power, and it's not haphazard. It's quite ingenious use of all of this, and it's because of his understanding of certain metaphysical realities or his own personal inclinations that is quite clear in his work. But thank you very much. I don't want to be taking any more time from questions from our attendees. There are quite a few of them. Hopefully we'll be able to get us through as many as we can. There are many questions and we only have 24 minutes remaining, so we'll see what we can do. I'll start with the first one. Do you have any bibliographical references concerning Arabic typography, concerning the transition from calligraphy to typo?
Typography, the main publisher who's working on that is Khat Foundation in the Netherlands. So I would highly recommend that you look at them. They have a few references on the topic, and they have one of maybe the only very thorough reference book on all Arabic type design. So I would recommend the Khat Foundation in the Netherlands.
Yeah, there is the book of Huda Abi Faris, which is called actually Arabic Typography. And then there is Arabic Type for Designers, also published by her, and then 7 different volumes for pioneer graphic designers as well. And there is many essays by Thomas Milo and many others, but not really in the form of a book. There are many essays about Arabic typography and the transition from, I would not say calligraphy, but the printing and then the typesetting, the early use of technology in the 80s, and then letter set as well, and so on.
That was, I didn't mention the name. It was a question from Mona Zaibat. Another question from Mirvat Abul Khair. Some Arabic scripts, especially the classic ones, are not immediately readable and are decaying due to time, environmental factors, and even demolition in some cases. Are there preservation projects in progress? If digitization of the existing scripts present on old and historic buildings, mosques, cemeteries, khanqahs, etc., is to be done in order to preserve their existence and distinctive and unique styles, as well as build a comprehensive catalog of this artistic and literary form, how can graphic designers help?
Noha, would you like to give her the good news, or should I?
Go ahead. Yes, the excellent news. Everyone should know about this website. Everyone.
So, I'm sorry to see that he was actually here.
He left. He left.
So Bernard O'Kane has documented all of the inscriptions in Cairo in a beautiful website. We highly recommend. We will try to get you the link now. So all the scripts that are actually disappearing.
I'll put the link in the chat right now.
Yes, thank you. So all the scripts that you see are disappearing of the monuments of Cairo were actually preserved by Bernard and his team of researchers, and they are actually available on a website. So you can actually skip.
And for free.
And for free, exactly.
Also, Amina mentioned that she's going to answer this question. Amina?
Yeah, Amina sent it, yeah.
I'm putting this in the chat right now.
Yeah, it's
Amina. No, Amina sent it already. Okay,
yeah.
No, I didn't see that. Okay, excellent. Okay, next question from Alex Siegerman. Hello, congrats on the fabulous book. Can you talk about the research process that you undertook for the book? What archives, official and unofficial, did you use to reconstruct this important history? Were there difficulties, surprises in accessing these archives?
Thank you, Alex, for a very beautiful question and also exhausting question, because it's just the trauma of of collecting the data comes back. No, I mean, joking aside, it was quite a laborious process. It took us almost 2 years to collect the data, in addition to the 10, 15 years each of us had collecting books and looking at things and being interested in the topic. So it wasn't only that the 2 years was the condensed research, but for us, it's actually a lifelong quest that we had both started on a long time ago. The main archives we used are the Rare Books and Special Collections archive at the American University in Cairo Library. We also used the American University in Beirut archive, and there was also the archive of Aboudi Abu Jawde in Beirut, who was also very useful. So that's in terms of archives. In terms of artists, Haitham, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, that's the part which you could call actually archive, but also there is personal collections, which mostly the most resourceful source that we had. So they have the personal collection of someone like Dia Arzawi, for example. He did give us the whole history of modern art and design in Iraq from 60s until today. And there is every maybe artist we spoke after long sessions. It was not just easy from the first time we speak to them. Then they give us the material and actually give us names, colleagues, and so on. So that's from the artist part, especially in Egypt, Iraq, and Syria, and Lebanon as well. And but also good to mention also the newspapers and magazines, like publishing houses as well. So some of the archives of Al-Ahram, Dar al-Hilal, Dar al-Kutub, those also, like Rose Al-Yusuf, we tried hard with this archive. It's not the easiest one to access because it's really very difficult, but we managed to get some.
The most difficult part, Alex, was actually recognizing that we could not stop writing the history of Arab graphic design within the geography of the Arab world. And we had to actually, because of the political condition, because of the socioeconomic situation in the region, we did not settle for looking within the Arab world, because a lot of the brilliant examples were actually designers living outside of the Arab world. So a lot of the Iraqi designers were in the diaspora, and we had to reach out to them in London and in the US to collect data. Haitham went and interviewed. I interviewed Jem Mahdawi in Paris. We had another scholar interview Kamal Boulata in Berlin. So it was actually utilizing our network also outside of the Arab world to reach out to the designers who have left, but whose narrative is just as important as those living within the geography of the Arab world.
In the Arab world, of course, Alex, you know that also we with our citizenships, we're not really allowed to go everywhere. So I got denied in a visa to Algeria. We couldn't travel to Sudan, Bahia, luckily because she have a Lebanese citizenship, she smuggled herself into Syria. But it was very difficult even within the Arab world to get an access.
We don't have access to Yemen because of what's going on. Syria was tricky. We couldn't visit Iraq. So unfortunately, due to this, I mean, the book would have been like 10 volumes if we had the funding and the accessibility to these countries. There is so much to explore. And really, I would like to put this, we always say it, and we would like to put it out again. Please, this is only the beginning. There is so much to write about, and we really like to encourage other scholars to be interested. These are only, we're giving you little threads, and there's, I mean, so many books can come out of this book. So we really encourage everyone to consider writing about it.
It's such a pity that nowadays, in this age, this is the difficulties you as artists as well, trying to, Syria, Algeria. And yet 700 years ago, people were going from, the Mashriq to the Maghrib, and from the Maghrib to the Mashriq to learn with Yaqut al-Mustasimi. It's a crazy world. But Alex is telling you, I'm nodding and smiling over here. Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Another question, Hagar Raha This is a great discussion. The panelists touched upon stopping in 2000, shortly after the internet evolved. How do you see the impact of internet on the genuine creativity of the design realm? Did it make it easier for designers and introduce less distinctive work vis-a-vis the amount of real work and research that designers had to put on before their work actually could see the light?
Well, one thing, one big plus of the internet is the ability to archive, which was not available to designers before because of all the political condition and situations we were discussing. The ease of archiving online was a breakthrough for designers now. And this is why I'm saying we are more aware of each other's work. We know more of who's doing what. Before that, this information was slower, and because it was not properly archived, it disappeared. So in that sense, I think the internet was instrumental. Haitham, do you want to add?
Just to add examples of that, I mean, you have the Palestinian Poster Archive, which is online, that you can see all documentation about Palestinian
exactly, that's an important reference we forgot to mention. Yes, back to referencing the Palestinian Poster Archive is a great resource if you're interested in
as
the
well. There is an archive of the Iraqi modern art, like, so they have all scanned poster and publication. All publication actually is done for Iraqi modern art for like exhibitions, museum shows and stuff. They are also online archived, scans of them. So there is initiatives, personal initiatives to archive, and that's only thanks to the internet. So
we have Hadil saying hi from Iraq. Hi Hadil. We say hi from Cairo. Thank you for joining.
We still have quite a few questions. We're going to try our best to cover as many as we can. Maisa Kalai, can we consider calligraphy as one of the new stages of Arabic calligraphy evolution?
That's a loaded question, and Haitham, I will answer it if you don't mind.
I don't want to go there. I mean, just leave it with you.
Yeah, so it's really it's something we need to look in depth in, and we have some historians who are working on graffiti as an art form. You have someone like Basma Hamdi who co-authored a book called The Walls of Freedom, where they were documenting the art of the revolution, but in it she has documented a lot of the calligraphic styles that were being used in the graffiti style. So calligraphy, if you mean this fluid form, is the father of that form is Nja Mahdawi, the guy you just saw now. And everybody who's drawing on the streets are inspired, and they clearly say we are inspired by Nja Mahdawi. And it's just this fluid style. But really the people who are innovating on the structure, it's not really within the street art world, it's within the artists that we just shared with you. Someone like Samir Sayiq, for example, someone like Rashid Quraishi, like Hasan Masoudi. These are the innovators of form, the architects of form. And the street art, mostly they are mainly copies of what goes on in that sphere. I hope I didn't dance around the question. I hope I answered it.
Thank you, Bahia. A question from Ben. What would you take as 3 underlying teachings from Arabic design through the ages? 3 core points. And he's saying great lecture.
Thank you, Ben. I don't know if I can do 3. Haitham, can you do 3? I have like 10 now, but I'm trying to summarize them into 3.
No, I cannot do 3, but I mean, you can just throw one.
Yeah, I think to me the main one is continuity, and this is the main idea I would like to drive, is that there is continuity, because with wars, with uprisings, with colonization, you feel like the tree is being cut all the time. There's an attempt to cut the tree, and then it suddenly sprouts. Magically it sprouts, and you see someone like Muhyiddin al-Abbad recreating older manuscripts and being inspired by the style. So continuity is a key idea. Connection is another key idea. What happened with the Palestinian cause, how someone like Burhan Kutli stopped identifying as a Syrian designer, and he would say, I'm Palestinian. And he would exhibit his work and do all his work inspired and for the Palestinian people. And when he would have an exhibition, he would invite a representative of the PLO for the opening of his exhibition anywhere in the world. So it's this connection that was happening around the Arab world is another idea. Haitham, do you want to throw one?
It's the connection, but I mean it's the belief. I would say I would name it as the belief, because they believed in a cause, and then you can see that Bahia just mentioned the Palestinian posters that are used in Africa, and I saw a documentation of in Senegal, and they saw the PLA posters actually hanged on the walls of in Senegal for this, and Nigeria as well, and. So I think it's the belief. I think me and Bahia, we are not really nationalists. Bahia, I'm speaking on your behalf, but you can see that they have a big belief, whether it's the Arab Pan project or the Palestinian code. But that's actually was the connection that as Bahia mentioned, is that they believe that they believed in something, and then it goes from Maghrib to the Mashriq with the one belief. Bahia, if you have something else in your mind, I mean, really, I cannot verbalize it in one word or even one sentence. I feel like I need to give more and more to this.
I think so. To me, it's a continuity, connection between the different groups, and then it's nice to see how history. You see the circles of history, how there's loops in history with the invention of a new technology, how everybody adapts it, how the visual language adapts, and then how it goes back. It goes inspired. What was so the looping of history is the third one, I would say.
Yeah, history repeats itself.
I think we have time for one more question. Ism Muhiddin al-Labad, that's from Samia al-Khodari. Ism Muhiddin al-Labad and Hilmi al-Tuni, aren't they considered mustalhimin turath sha'bi, in the sense that most of the motifs were taken from already folk artists?
Definitely, but where did folk artists get inspired from? So you see, it's a continuity.
So it goes back before even folk art. So or it goes back to the Islamic art and early manuscripts, and that's where you can see the initial inspiration. But again, using element of folk art, yes, I would not say. I mean, the word mustalhimin, I don't think it's inspired, but they created their own motifs, which again, based on the source of inspiration that comes from Islamic art.
Good. We have one more question then. What are the connections with such international phenomena in graphic design as modernism, postmodernism, and deconstructivism, etc.?
Yeah, I will take this question, Haitham. Yeah?
Go ahead.
Thank you for trying to again reinterpret Arab design from a Western lens. And I think this is problematic for me, because it's not whether, as you saw with the examples we shared, it's not whether there was modern, postmodern, deconstructivist art in the Arab world. We have proven in the book that designers in the Arab world were at par in with the global conversation that was taking place on the big ideas that were unfolding. But we were also dealing with the extra layer of identity, of decolonization, of being inspired and looking towards our past and trying to understand who we are. And that created a different visual language. So the question would not be whether there is like modern, postmodern Arab art, but what else, what extra, what more was there then? And we really need to stop looking at design in different parts of the world from a purely Western lens, because it's proven to be very narrow.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this, which is very significant. Most of the people that came with a new visual identity related to the Arab world, they actually went to foreign education, and then they come up with completely new visual language. And I mean, we go through the 100 years, you see some of them, they were actually being taught by foreign educators or actually traveled abroad But when you see the work, there is a transition and a great change in terms of finding the new identity. And we've been cornered before, as Bahia mentioned, that we always have to have a comparative to the, which we are part anyway of the global context, but still not to be just only classified under this umbrella, but we have new definitions and new language that needs to be actually introduced to the global context again.
Yeah, so the whole point of the book is to shift the canon globally.
Excellent. Can we have one more question?
Yeah, I think we can. We have.
Go ahead. We are here. Go ahead.
All right. Mirvat Abul Khair. The utility of new scripts in the post-internet age is more important than artistic form. So is it possible to quantify utility of script in terms of attributes, indicators, geometric or otherwise, to maybe enable the automatic generation of digital Arabic scripts?
Haysam, do you want to answer this one?
I'm just trying to, I'm reading the question one more time to see where I can get, which angle actually to answer the question. Because I mean, from my perspective, I'll just speak of my perspective, because I'm a geek. I like technology, and I like to transfer everything to machine learning and AI, and try to use technology to I will not say imitate a human being with artificial intelligence. Anyway, it's about imitating intelligence, the human intelligence. But I still, as much as I'm really a big fan of machine learning and AI, but still I see the human ability to create new forms, even in this technologically advanced era we live in. Still the human will win, will beat the artificial intelligence. I have tried with related to how to transfer, generate new scripts using machine learning. But again, what comes every day with human being is you cannot really imitate. That's from my perspective. I don't know, Bahia, what you would say about this.
I mean, yes, of course, because it's the compounded human experience that creates this, and I'm not sure whether AI will eventually replace it. I cannot predict, but then you see what AI is doing now, and you wonder. So it's a valid question, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the book. It's timely. We all needed it. Extremely informative. I've personally learned a lot from it. Thank you for answering all the questions so brilliant, and thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you for hosting and being so enthusiastic about Arabic calligraphy as I am. And thank you, Amina, and everybody who organized the talk. We are very grateful.
Yeah, thanks to Eric, Amina, Dina, Noha. Really, it is a pleasure to be here, and hopefully we can do more in the future.
We sure will.
Okay.
Thank you,
everyone from all over the world for joining. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.